Hello there, Drew Hanish, Whiskey Lore. I am back. It has been a while. And a lot of the reason why it's been a while is because I went through the absolute fun of COVID back in January. And I was one of the unlucky ones who lost their sense of smell. I didn't lose my taste, but I lost my sense of smell. It's slowly been coming back to me, but not well enough for me to feel like I could do tasting, so I kind of held off on it. I've had my 2 shots now on top of having COVID, and amazingly, today is the first day I've been able to taste oak in I don't know how long. It's been an interesting progression coming back to full sense of taste and smell, and if you've watched or listened to my episode on Whiskey Lore about the palate and tasting and how we taste, you know how critical the nose is to your ability to taste and get flavors. You can get tastes like salt, sweet, sour, bitter, but it's hard to define things, and that's been my struggle. And really, it's been sad trying to smell things and be like, I don't know, it all just smells the same to me. So after my second shot, suddenly now I can smell oak again. So maybe there's something good about that. And so I am back, and I'm going to be doing a tasting of 2 different double oaked whiskeys. Why double oaked? Well, first of all, I got these on my recent trip out to Los Angeles, a big 6,000 mile drive back and forth from South Carolina, and I ended up finding a bottle of Woodford Reserve double oaked in a store for $45. Normally I see it at $50 to $55, and last year in bracketology it was in the top 8 or top 4, I can't remember exactly, but you guys love it, so I thought I need to pick up a bottle of it, so when I can taste oak again, I'll be able to taste it and see what you guys are all excited about. Then I also made a stop off on my way back. I took a bit of a northern route and came through Missouri into Indiana. And in Indiana, I stopped at the Huber Winery and Starlight Distillery. And talking about bracketology, this year's winner of bracketology was the Starlight Distillery's Rickhouse Rye. And I'm going to do a tasting on that coming up soon. But they also gave me a bottle of the double oaked bourbon whiskey. And so I wanted to do a tasting of this side by side with the double oaked Woodford Reserve and see how they compare. So, interesting thing between these 2 different whiskeys and where they come from, their histories actually go back, in a way, to within 5 years of each other in the way of origin stories. The farm that the Hubers own is a family farm, and 1843 is the year that they established that farm, just 5 years before Oscar Pepper established the old Oscar Pepper Distillery, which is the distillery that Woodford Reserve now produces its whiskey in. So interesting little correlation there. They've been neighbors for a long time. Well, they're neighbors. That's a long drive for neighbors, but all right, so I'm going to get in. I'm going to taste these 2 and give you my thoughts on them, and we'll talk first about this Carl T. Huber 106 proof double oaked whiskey. It spends 4 years in the barrel, and then it spends an additional 6 months in a Seguin, I think I'm saying that properly, Seguin Moreau vanilla toasted bourbon barrel, brand new bourbon barrel. And so by hearing that name, you might assume that this is going to be pretty heavy in vanilla on the nose. And it is. It is. It has the oakiness to it. it's so nice to be able to smell oak again, and a little bit of a musty kind of like almost like a sawdust. It's interesting how that works out. It's got a very fragrant vanilla nose to it. Now, one of the things that I like to do is to jump back and forth between the two, because that helps me really spot the differences. And this is a 90.4 proof whiskey, so it's a little lighter, and the nose is lighter on this one. Now, this one is their standard Woodford Reserve, but it goes through an extra year, or almost a year, I guess, in another barrel. And that barrel is actually a charred and toasted barrel. So you might kind of think that would be heavy-handed in terms of the char. And so you kind of nose it looking for that. And it's interesting because it's got, in a way, it's got a similar nose to it. It's just lighter. This one's a little bit sweeter, a little bit more fragrant than this one is. In a way, they have a very similar profile to them. I get a little more like an acetone to this one, though, versus the other. And I have to really draw on that one to be able to pull out. Yeah, and this one's more sawdust. It's really interesting. All right, so I'm going to taste this one, which is the Huber's. This one's a little lighter in color than the other, not much. That one, I guess the additional char is what stands out on that one. So on this, I get the oakiness. I get a little baking spice in there. There's a note I can't really name there. It's a little lighter on the mouthfeel for something that's been in two barrels. It tends to dissolve on the palate a little bit faster than most. The caramel comes through. The rye's there. These are both 18% rye. This is a mixture, I think, of two different whiskeys, actually. So that may not be an accurate number. But I know both of them are higher ryes, around 18%. But it doesn't really stand out that much. It's still, again, more of the char from the barrel is there. And there's a little bit of a bitter oak on the finish that lingers through there, and a little bit of a vanilla aftertaste that jumps in there. Now, the only thing on that one is that probably a little heavier mouthfeel would be really a nice addition to that. But if you put it on ice, you wouldn't know the difference. Mouthfeel wouldn't matter. So, okay, now this one, the vanilla, after tasting that one, the vanilla jumps out a lot more on this one. A little bit of a butterscotch. I'm not detecting as much of the acetone as I did the first time I tasted this. Yeah, so that has a little bit more of the milky mouthfeel to it. Still a bit of that bitter oak in there. Leathery. The char kind of holds in there. both of these are dry whiskeys. I wouldn't, if you're looking for something fruity and sweet, you're not going to find that with either of these. Even though I'm giving notes of vanilla and butterscotch on the palate, both of these dry out, and the wood really seems to have a handle on both of these whiskeys. So, very interesting comparison. I don't know. I would probably put this one on ice, and that one I would drink as is when I was in the mood for a dry bourbon. And so that is my analysis of these. I will be doing some more tastings. I have a lot of whiskey I collected on my trip. And I have a lot of stories to tell. You see this bottle? See if we can get the focus there. Yes, I have a story to tell about this bottle, and I'm going to be doing a tasting of that bottle. That is, if you look closely, actually, you won't see it on the front, you'll see it on the back. Look at the date stamp on that. This bottle of Old Taylor was made while Colonel E.H. Taylor was still alive. And I have, like I say, great story with that one. And I will get to that in my podcast. Well, first of all, my podcast episode, I'm going to be covering it. But I'll also probably cover it in one of my tasting videos, because I would like to do a tasting video on that Old Taylor. So that is something that is coming up. And so glad to be back with you guys and doing tastings again. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, instagram.com/whiskylore. You can see all the pictures I take along the way. And make sure to look for Whiskey Lore, the podcast, and tell your friends about it. All right? Cool. All right. Until next time, cheers and slanjava. Caramel. See, after I get done doing these tastings, and I'm not focusing so much, new flavors really start to punctuate. It's really interesting. A little bit more of that spices in there, but it's not a rye spice to me. It's, I guess, maybe a little bit, but interesting. All right, enough.